Okay, so if I just throw a phrase out at you right now, vulnerability is strength. What's the very first thing, like the first person that pops into your head?
Oh, absolutely. It's Brené Brown.
It's Brené Brown, 100%.
I mean, her TED Talk is not even just a video anymore, right? It's a cultural monument. It has, what, like 60 million views? It's basically the Star Wars of psychology talks.
It is, and the message itself is, I mean, it's undeniably powerful. We've all bought in, drop the armor, let yourself be seen, because that's, the birthplace of connection. It's become the golden rule of modern emotional health.
It's on coffee mugs. It's in corporate seminars. It's everywhere.
Everywhere. But, and here's the twist for today's deep dive, what if that universal truth isn't actually universal?
And that is the massive and, let's be honest, kind of uncomfortable question we are unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into this really fascinating and I'd say provocative article by Ryan Collison called Brené Brown and the Feminization of Therapy.
And before you, the listener, hit pause, thinking this is just some angry takedown piece, we should be really clear. This is not a cancel Brené Brown episode, right?
Not at all. That is so important to clarify up front. The source isn't saying Brené Brown is wrong. He's not saying vulnerability is bad. He's asking a much more structural question.
Which is?
Have we taken specifically, you could say, female way of processing emotion and just labeled it the only correct way to be a human?
Wow, that's a bold question. It really challenges the idea that, just because the therapeutic model works for a lot of people, and specifically women who are the main consumers of therapy, that it has to be the default for everyone.
And if it is the default, does it end up pathologizing men?
Pathologizing men.
Exactly. The whole tension here is, are we telling men they're doing feelings wrong just because they do them differently? And again, the source is really careful to say this is not some men's rights manifesto. It's not a victim thing.
Yeah.
It's an investigation into efficacy. If therapy is designed around, say, verbal processing and face-to-face vulnerability, what happens to the people? And yeah, often men who just don't operate that way.
Okay, let's get into the weeds on that, because I think most of us just assume therapy is therapy. You go in, you sit on a couch, maybe there's a tissue box, you make eye contact, and you talk. That's it. So what is the Brown framework the article is actually looking at?
So the mainstream view, which is, yes, heavily influenced by Brown, but also just the whole history of psychotherapy, it really rests on a few key pillars. You've got vulnerability, showing yourself without armor.
Right.
You've got shame resilience, naming and talking about your shame to take away its power. And then you have emotional expression, talking about your feelings with people you trust to build connection.
Which, I mean, on paper, that all sounds objectively good. Who doesn't want connection? Who wants to feel shame?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the source is clear. This is research-based. It works. The outcomes are positive for millions. But Collison argues that this specific mode of connection, the sitting face-to-face, verbally naming feelings, wanting empathy before you get solutions, that closely mirrors female typical processing.
Female typical processing. Okay, that feels like a term we need to unpack carefully. What does the author mean by that?
Yeah, and he's careful to avoid saying, all women do this, all men do that. It's not biological essentialism. We're talking about population-level patterns. Right?
Big, broad pattern.
Exactly. And the article suggests that women, on average, tend to process things verbally. The talking isn't just the lead-up to the work. The talking is the work.
Oh, I've seen that dynamic a million times. You talk through something to figure out how you feel about it. The act of articulating it is the solution.
Yes. Narration as processing. You call a friend, you hash it out for an hour, and you feel better at the end, even if literally nothing in the outside world has changed.
Because the goal was the connection. The goal was the empathy.
Precisely. And in that model, if someone jumps in with a solution too fast, it feels dismissive. Because that wasn't the point.
Right. But the source contrasts this with a male typical mode. And this is honestly where the light bulb really went on for me. He talks about action-based processing. But, play devil's advocate for a second. Isn't that just avoiding your feelings?
That is the standard interpretation, yes.
Yeah.
If you're trained in that verbal model, anything that doesn't look like talking looks like avoidance. But Collison's whole point is that for many men, the processing happens while they're doing something else.
Parallel activity.
Parallel activity. Think side-by-side versus face-to-face.
Okay, give me a classic example.
The easiest one is two guys driving in a car, or fixing something, or shooting hoops. The source brings up the man who only opens up when he's driving, staring out the windshield, and pointedly not making eye contact.
Everyone has experienced that. The deepest talks with my dad or my brother happen when we're not looking at each other. We're staring at a TV screen or the road or, a fishing line.
Exactly. The visual focus is on the task, but the emotional channel is wide open. But see, in a therapy room, if a client starts looking away or fidgeting, we're trained to interpret that as resistance.
As avoidance.
But Collison says for this male-typical pattern, the action isn't avoidance. It's the container. The action is what creates the safety that's required to even access the emotion in the first place.
So the distraction is actually the key.
In a way, yeah. If you take that away, if you force that man to sit still, make intense eye contact, and just emote, he'll probably shut down. Not because he's broken, but because you've removed his safety net. You've taken away the very thing he uses to metabolize stress.
That's a huge shift in perspective. It's not that he can't process, it's that he needs to be doing something with his hands or his body to do it. It's almost kinetic.
And just think what that implies for a traditional therapy room, which is almost always sit still, look at me, and talk.
It's the female mode by default.
Correct. So if a man walks into that room and has a hard time, is it because he has an emotional deficit? Or is it because the room wasn't built for his operating system?
And that leads us right into this idea of pathologizing. The article gives these specific male behaviors that always get labeled as deficits or resistance. I want to go through them because I think a lot of people will recognize this stuff.
Do it.
First one up, humor.
Oh, this is a huge one. In a really serious conversation like a couple therapy session, if the guy cracks a joke, the standard response is, you're deflecting.
You're using humor to avoid the pain. Yeah, you get the eye roll.
Right. But the source argues that humor is often a metabolic tool. It's how some men process pain. It's not about avoiding the topic. It's a way to approach the topic without getting totally overwhelmed by it. It regulates the intensity.
It's like a pressure release valve.
Exactly. So when we label it deflection, we might be accidentally shutting down their only way in. We're basically saying, your key doesn't fit this lock, so they just stay outside.
That is fascinating. So instead of seeing the joke as an exit, we should see it as the front door. Okay, number 2, problem solving. The classic, I don't want you to fix it, I just want you to listen.
We hear this all the time in relationship advice. Men always jump to solutions. And we usually frame that as, a bad habit, a lack of emotional intelligence.
Right.
But Collison suggests that for a lot of men, solving the problem is how they engage with the emotion about the problem. It's not dismissal. It's a form of active care.
So when he tries to fix the leaky faucet you're upset about, or gives you 5 ways to deal with your boss, he's not ignoring your sadness. In his world, he's trying to fix the sadness by removing the thing that's causing it.
Precisely. The action is the empathy. He's saying, I see your pain, and I am now going to exert energy to stop that pain. So when we tell him to stop fixing it, what he might hear is, stop caring.
Man, that is just a recipe for total miscommunication. He thinks he's showing love, and you think he's being dismissive. And then the third one is the need for space, the withdrawal.
The man cave stereotype.
Right, which we usually frame as stonewalling or shutting down.
Or even hostility. But the source frames it as consolidation. It's going away to process things internally so they can come back integrated and whole. If you demand immediate, real-time verbal processing, that tell me what you're feeling right now, you might be asking for something he literally can't give you in that moment.
Because he hasn't figured it out yet himself.
He hasn't run the simulation. He needs the quiet to figure out his position, and then he can come back. If we pathologize that need for space as abandonment, we just create this panic cycle.
It really points to a structural issue the article brings up, which is the therapy pipeline. This isn't just about individual therapists. It's about who even becomes a therapist.
And this is a key systemic point he makes, who's drawn to a career in psychotherapy. Generally, it's people who value verbal processing, deep interpersonal connection, and talking about feelings.
Which enough statistically skews female.
It skews heavily female. And the men who do enter the field often share those same traits. So the people designing the therapy, teaching the therapy, and practicing the therapy, they are the very people whose psychology already matches the current design.
It's a feedback loop.
That's a perfect feedback loop.
Yeah.
If you love talking things out, you become a therapist. And you design therapy that relies on talking things out. And then when someone comes in who processes through action or humor, it looks like a failure to engage instead of just a different language.
We end up treating difference as a pathology.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got these different styles, the face-to-face verbal processor and the shoulder-to-shoulder action processor, but the article goes even deeper. It gets into something really sensitive, the actual cost of vulnerability.
This is the part of the article he calls the vulnerability paradox. And honestly, this is where we had to be really, really nuanced, because this is about real relationships.
Right, because this is where it gets pretty controversial. The source basically argues that the advice to be vulnerable lands very differently based on your gender.
It does. He says there's a double standard. For women, the cultural script, and again, these are broad patterns, is that vulnerability tends to activate caregiving. If a woman cries or admits she's overwhelmed, the general response from others is support, validation, help.
It's a reinforced behavior. You do it, you get a hug, you feel closer.
Exactly. It's a strategy that, for the most part, works. But for men, the source argues the script is fundamentally different. When men show deep vulnerability, I'm not talking about I had a hard day, I mean crying, admitting helplessness, showing real fear, it doesn't always activate caregiving.
It can activate a loss of status.
A loss of status, or he mentions partners feeling burdened, or even a loss of attraction.
Yeah.
The source notes that while many women say they want a sensitive, vulnerable partner, the reality of seeing your partner truly undone can be jarring. It can contradict a very deep-seated expectation of the man as the rock.
That's the uncomfortable truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
We say we want men to open up, but when they actually do, if they're like sobbing on the floor, it can feel scary. It can feel like the safety is gone.
Right. And it can lead to the man feeling like he's lost respect, or that he's just become another problem for his partner to manage.
So the man tries to do what Brené Brown says, to drop the armor, and instead of getting connection, he gets burned.
And that is the trap. He tries vulnerability, he gets a social penalty for it, his partner pulls away, maybe his friends mock him, and he learns a very rational lesson.
That vulnerability is dangerous. It's a trap.
And then he goes to therapy, and the therapist, working from the default model, tells him, no, you're just not doing it right. You need to be more vulnerable. You're resisting.
Which completely ignores his real-world experience.
It ignores the social context.
Yeah.
We're giving men advice to use a tool that might actually be hurting them in their environment without teaching them how to navigate that risk.
Yeah.
We're universalizing a strategy, just be open, without admitting that the consequences are not universal.
And the author is careful. This isn't an all women hate vulnerable men argument.
No, absolutely not. Secure partners can hold that space. Millions of partners do it beautifully every single day. But the population-level pattern is strong enough that it complicates the simple advice to just let it all out.
It's kind of tragic when you think about it. You have men who are lonely and isolated, and the one cure we offer them is something that their life has taught them is unsafe.
It's like telling someone to jump without checking if there's a net. Which brings us to the both-and solution, because the article is very clear. This isn't about saying traditional masculinity is great, let's leave men alone.
Right. We have to address the toxic parts. The source is pretty blunt that the male armor causes real, measurable damage. We're not letting guys off the hook to just bottle everything up.
Not at all. The source lists the stats. Men die younger, higher suicide rates, more social isolation, addiction, violence. The inability to ask for help is a lethal problem. That armor is real, and it kills people.
So we can't just say, well, men process through silence, so let them suffer in silence. That's not the answer.
Exactly. That's the both and. You have to hold two truths at once. Truth one, traditional masculinity can be isolating and harmful, and men need better emotional skills. Truth two, the current way we teach those skills might be totally blind to male psychology.
Okay, so what's the alternative? If we don't force men to act more like women, but we also don't let them stay isolated, what do we do? The source had some practical suggestions for a more masculine-informed therapy.
It starts with just changing the container, the simplest one. Walk and talk sessions.
Just getting out of the chair.
Yes. Movement. Using activity as the container for the conversation. If a man needs to pace, let him pace. It shifts the whole dynamic from a face-to-face interrogation to a side-by-side collaboration.
It sounds so simple, but I bet it completely changes the neurochemistry of the interaction.
It lowers cortisol. It makes it feel like a project you're working on together, not an examination of his soul. It aligns perfectly with that parallel activity mode we were talking about.
What about the humor part?
It's about validation. Instead of shutting it down, a therapist or a partner can see it as a valid way in. You can actually say, I see you're joking about this painful thing. That tells me you're ready to start looking at it.
So you laugh with him and then gently steer it toward the deeper stuff.
Exactly. You use the joke as the bridge instead of burning it down. You just acknowledge that the humor is serving a function.
I also really liked his point about focusing on function over feeling. Can you unpack that?
This is crucial. We tend to measure progress in therapy by the amount of emotional disclosure. How many tears were shed, how many I feel statements. But the source argues we should measure progress by well-being and function.
So is he sleeping better? Is he a better partner? Is he happier? Even if he's not crying about his childhood every week.
Right. For some men, healing looks like solving the problem and moving on with a lighter load. They might never give you a 20-minute monologue about their inner child. And that can be okay.
It's about accepting fixing it as a legitimate form of emotional engagement.
Precisely. It's about expanding our definition of processing to include action, humor, problem solving. It's meeting men where they are instead of demanding they become someone else before we'll help them.
You know, it reminds me of that line from the article. Maybe the man who processes through action isn't avoiding emotion. Maybe he's processing emotion through the modality that works for his nervous system.
That is the core takeaway. We have to stop seeing differences as deficits. If we can do that, we open the door for so many men who feel like therapy isn't for them just because they don't want to sit on a couch and stare into somebody's eyes.
So if we zoom out, what does this mean for you, the listener? Whether you're looking for a therapist or just trying to understand your partner or even yourself.
I think it's an invitation to just be an observer of our own processing styles. If you're someone who needs to talk it out face to face, that's beautiful. Do that. But if you or your partner needs to go for a run or fix something on the house or crack a joke to get through a hard time, maybe just take a beat.
Don't automatically assume it's avoidance.
Right. Ask yourself, is this actually helping them metabolize the stress? Maybe that isn't a wall they're putting up. Maybe that's just a different language of healing.
And we shouldn't force everyone to speak the same language. That feels like the bottom line.
The goal is the same for everyone. Connection, health, resilience. But the path to get there might look really different. And just recognizing that difference might save a lot of relationships.
The article ends on a really humble note, which I appreciated. The author just admits, I don't know.
It's the sign of a strong argument, honestly. He says, maybe he's wrong. Maybe verbal vulnerability is the only way. But he doubts it. And he leaves us with this question. We know shame corrodes and we know vulnerability connects. But is our current definition of connection accidentally excluding half the population?
It's a huge question. If we stop treating male psychology as a defective version of female psychology, what would mental health even look like?
I think it would look a lot more inclusive, probably a lot more effective, and honestly, a lot more interesting. We might learn things about resilience that the verbal model never even thought to ask about.
That is a lot to think about. I'm definitely going to be watching how I handle stress this week. Do I talk or do I do?
And just remember, neither one is wrong. That's the key.
Exactly. Well, that's it for this deep dive. We hope this gave you a new lens to look at therapy, relationships, and maybe even yourself.
Keep asking questions.
See you next time.